Hello. We're really glad that you found us.
We are a church family, made up of all sorts of people.
From different backgrounds, who loves Jesus.
Our desire is for people to know Jesus.
To know that they are loved by him.
And to be part of a family who do life together.
With Jesus at the centre.
We meet up every Sunday to worship.
And be family together.
All seeking to demonstrate Jesus' love to others through being
rooted in Christ and growing in love.
Yes, everything for you.
Whether you're familiar with church or not,
you are very welcome at One Christian Centre.
As we celebrate together,
we hope you engage with us.
As we make Jesus known.
Right, today, Flawed but Flourishing, or Flawed yet Flourishing. We're continuing in our series, and today is all about confidence. Who's feeling confident? About what? I don't know, generally. I suppose it's like a vote on optimism, isn't it? How confident are people? Put your hands up if you're feeling like you're about a 5. Out of 10, sorry, yeah, very good point. 5% out of 100, yeah. 5%, okay. Well, no, we'll go 5 out of 10. So who's feeling around a 5? Yeah, middle 7s, 9s. Yeah, there's a few 7s, good job. 10, anybody venturing for a 10? No, maybe not. Just embarrassed to put your hand up, aren't you? Look, confidence is a really sort of weird thing because, particularly talking about it in a church environment, because churches are typically very front-led. I don't actually like that. I think we sort of miss that table culture that we were speaking about earlier. But it's very easy to sort of come into church and look at people up the front and think, wow, they're really confident. Let me be really honest with you. I'm not a particularly confident person. And I certainly didn't used to be. So confidence is a weird thing. But my reflection is that if you believe God wants you to do something, God is able to give you what you need to be able to do the job. Putting it very, very simply and very bluntly. And of course, the world goes the other way with that. And that's kind of caricatured in the Garden of Eden, where the temptation to have the fruit of tree of knowledge of good and evil is basically to say, I want to go my own way. I want to solve the problems myself. You know, and that's a really tempting offer, isn't it? Because the opposite is exactly what we've been singing about just now. Lord, I need you. That defines Christianity. Not just for salvation, most importantly, but that ongoing expression of our life and walk with God. I just want to say that every time we do what we do here, whether it looks like me preaching or these guys lead in worship, I just find the faithfulness of God shine through every single time. Because I sometimes sit, and I'll be honest with you, during the week, and I just go, God, I've got no idea what we're doing on Sunday, but somehow I still believe that God will give us something, and it comes through. So confidence can be really misplaced. Look, I lead quite a large team in the job I do, and again, looking back in my life, when I was younger, I can't believe that I'd ever end up in that sort of position. But I've always felt that God was leading me, not just to do what we do here, but also my work sphere as well. And that's really important, to not sort of chunk up your life and go, well, God can give me confidence in this bit, the church bit, the faith bit, and actually the work bit I've just got to sort out myself. No, you can choose to believe that God has put you where you are, in church, in work, in your personal life, and everything else. And, you know, that confidence piece, the principles by which we draw down on God and have faith in him to give us what we need, can apply in all those circumstances. And I've always believed God has put me in my job for a reason. If I didn't do that, if I didn't choose to believe that, then my work becomes nothing more than a means of making money. And that is missing the point, because as Christians, we're spending enormous amounts of time in work, aren't we? So if we choose to invite God into that situation and recognize that he's leading us, then wow, what a change, what a kaleidoscope of color he brings into that experience. But all the way through my sort of job journey, if you like, I just continually am amazed at how God has been able to make me confident or give me confidence. Because I don't think that's who I was when I was younger. Yeah, there's so many things we could talk about and reflect there. But look, we're talking this morning about confidence. Not man-engineered confidence, hubris, that self-belief, that Garden of Eden, the fruit. We're talking about confidence in God. God can do it. God can show up. And God can make a way. So we're going to read a story buried in the Old Testament about an unknown character called Barak. Does anybody think they know who Barak was and what he did? Deborah. Oh, somebody said Deborah. Yeah, a couple of people said Deborah. You're right. It's intertwined with the story of Deborah. Anybody else want to venture anything information-wise about Barak? No? Doesn't matter because we're going to read about it. So if you've got your Bibles, we're going to read Judges 4. We're not going to read the whole of the story, Judges 4 and 5, but just enough. So, Judges 4. Right, here goes. I'm going to read the whole chapter, by the way, so hold on to your seats. It's a long one. But here it goes. After Ehud died, the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, a king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in, here goes, Harosheth Hagoyim. Was that all right? That'll do. Haroshoth Hagoyim. Because he had 900 iron chariots and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried out to the Lord for help. Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at the time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites came to her to have their disputes decided. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead the way to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I'll go with you. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." "Very well," Deborah said, "I will go with you. But because of the way you're going about this, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kedesh, where he summoned Zebulun and Naphtali. 10,000 men followed him, and Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched his tent by the great trees in Zananim, near Kadesh. When they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera gathered together his 900 iron chariots and all the men with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day that the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Haroshoth Hagoyim. All the troops of Sisera fell by the sword. Not a man was left. Sisera, however, fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because they were friendly relations between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the clan of Heber the Kenite. The next section's rated 18, by the way. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered a tent, and she put a covering over him. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." So she opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. Stand in the doorway of the tent, he told her. If someone comes by and asks you, is anyone here? Say, no. But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. Come, she said, I will show you the man you're looking for. So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, the Canaanite king, before the Israelites. And the hand of the Israelites grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, the Canaanite king, until they destroyed him. Quite a story, isn't it? Quite a story. It's a long time since I thought about Barak, but Barak came to mind this week, and here we are today. Barak, flawed but flourishing. The theme of confidence. So it's all there in the chapter, isn't it? We've read it. Barak lived during the time of Deborah. Deborah was one of the 12 judges of Israel, and she came off the back of 20 years of Canaanite oppression, to the point at which the Israelites are crying out to God, God help us. What a state of affairs. And basically they drifted away from God, and God has subjected them to the rule of this cruel king called Jabin and his army commander Sisera. And this oppression had gone on for such a long time that eventually they got to the point where they recognized again their dependence upon God. And God calls Deborah, this amazing woman. She's like a superwoman, isn't she? Because she's not just a commander and a judge. She's also a wife. She's a prophetess. And she's just doing everything. She's got all these juggling balls in the air, and yet she's able to keep them all moving all at the same time. And God calls her, this woman who's a wife, a warrior, a prophetess, a songwriter, because she's faithful. And she's going to do what God has asked her to do. We'll just pause at this moment. Take courage that God uses both men and women. We're a church that believes that God uses both of the sexes, men and women. And it's really, really good to state that, because some churches don't believe that. Some churches believe that, women can't teach, women can't lead, and all the rest of it. Well, here's a clear example that we can't explain by the simple point that maybe there weren't any good men around who could do the job. The Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible clearly and explicitly states that God called Deborah. In a culture where women were not celebrated. In fact, the kind of parting shot to Barak is that your glory is going to go to a woman. That points to the culture in which this happened. But God chooses Deborah, a woman who's faithful and a woman who's going to do the job. And it's really good to be explicit and upfront about that here today. So what does Deborah do? She summons Barak and tells him to go and basically gather the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, 10,000 people, to go to Mount Tabor and defeat Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army. She gives him what we might call a direct instruction. Have you ever been given a direct instruction in life? Sometimes I have to do it in my household. We are leaving at 10 o'clock because I am preaching and leading on, direct instructions leave no room for doubt. This is what we are doing, or this is what you are doing. Sometimes it happens in work. And if you live in that sort of environment where you give and receive commands, you understand what it means. A direct instruction is unequivocal. Please go and do it. You have to do it. You have to follow through. And that's what Barak gets from Deborah. And this is why she's a leader. She has a prophetic edge to her, but she can give instruction. And she knows how to bring and lead a team of people around her. And that's fundamentally the construct of leadership. And look, Deborah gives this clear instruction to Barak about what to do. There's loads of ways to respond to direct instructions, isn't there? It can be a very simple yes. If you think of the story of Abraham, God tells him to leave where he's living, his country, and what does he do? He gets up straight away and he goes. So sometimes the answer can be a very, very straightforward yes. Sometimes it can be a straight out no. Think of Jonah. Think of the rich young ruler. Go and sell everything you have and give to the poor. Faith is going to cost me. It's not for me. But sometimes it can be a kind of middle of the road, maybe. A conditional yes. A halfway house. And our reaction to a direct instruction can often speak to where we are in terms of our confidence when it comes to faith. We see those reactions, those bold reactions of yes, like Abraham, or even Zacchaeus that we preached about a few weeks ago. Sometimes we can see the straight out no's where faith and the challenge it presents just presents too much cost to us and we walk away. Or it can be conditional. We're prepared to engage in a little bit of bargaining in the situation, perhaps directly with God or maybe through whom God is speaking to us. We've looked at the example of Gideon, the testing of faith. Is God really saying this? Is he really going to be with us? Moses, I'm not confident in my speech, and God provides Aaron to go with him. Or maybe like Barak, where when Deborah says go, he says yes, but only if you go with me. So sometimes our response to faith, our reaction to faith, can be a little bit conditional. And let's not be too hard on Barak. Look, so Barak has got his odds stacked against him, right? 10,000 of the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun sounds like quite a decent-sized army. But the point is, they're going to go and do battle with Sisera, who's got 900 iron chariots. Now, 900 sounds a lot less than 10,000, doesn't it? But the iron chariots are like the most modern form of warfare you're ever going to encounter in the Bible times. These are like the equivalent of tanks, of intercontinental ballistic missiles. These are like the thing to have, the thing to be feared, the thing by which the Canaanite king, Jabin, has exercised his authority and his rule and oppression for those 20 years. So he's a little bit shaky about it. And he wants Deborah to go with him. And Deborah says, yes, I will. But there's a kind of downside to that. And she says, basically, I will go with you, but because you have asked me to do that, because you're approaching this kind of challenge, this direct instruction in the way that you're doing, you're not going to get the honor. That honor is going to pass to somebody else. Turns out that somebody else is called Jael. So what happens? Well, with every direct instruction and every response, a story emerges. And in this particular story, what happens is God brings a massive rainstorm. We don't read about it in this chapter. We read about it in the chapter afterwards, where Deborah creates this song that narrates what has happened, turning, if you like, the story into a worshipful moment towards God. But God brings a massive rainstorm. And Barak has taken these 10,000 men up to the mountain, and they look down into the valley of Kishon. And as they go down and engage with Sisera's 900 chariots, God brings a massive rainstorm, and that Kishon River floods. And of course, it's obvious, chariots and mud and water don't work, do they? And eventually, that army is defeated. And Barak is able to chase and pursue Sisera, who is ultimately put to death through this gruesome story that we read at the back end of the chapter by this woman Jael. It's great having the sound of children, by the way. This is what real church looks like. That's what the table is all about. It's all ages, all noises, all experiences. It's fine, guys. Just relax. Don't worry. It's great to have you here. And look, the story that emerges, we can easily get bogged down in life into the what-ifs and the what could have happened. Because the point is, Deborah as a leader points out, if only you'd had more confidence, Barak, you could have got the glory. But let's not diminish the fact that Barak did actually go and fight the battle. And look at what he accomplished. And it's really interesting because as we read in Hebrews 11, the great long list of characters that God, or the writer to the Hebrews, is celebrating for their faith, Barak gets a mention. Even though Deborah has prophesied over him and sort of said, well, you know, unfortunately, because of your lack of confidence, because of the way you're approaching this, you're not going to get the glory forever. In Hebrews 11, I'm going to read it to you. In verse 32, if I can find it. I really do need varifocals, but there we go. What more shall I say? I don't have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Simeon, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised. Look, Barak is mentioned alongside David and Samuel. He's right up there. What does this tell us? If we focus only on what we've missed and not on actually what has been achieved, we can miss what faith is all about. Look, so often we think of faith as a binary thing, don't we? Faith is something we either have or we don't have. But actually, faith is semi-quantitative. Not like a scale where, like weight, you've got kilograms and grams and tons and all the rest of it. But it's semi-quantitative in the sense that there is gradations of faith. There's proportions or amounts of faith. And that's a really important thing to recognize, because if we focus on that single interaction between Deborah and Barak, we could walk away from that chapter and think, well, forget the fact that Barak managed to defeat Sisera. Actually, he failed because he didn't exercise faith. No, let's get this properly straightened out. He had faith. He just had to walk through a bit of a challenge in terms of how he applied it and how he saw the situation. Jesus described faith in semi-quantitative measures. Matthew 8's a great chapter to explore when it comes to this. Two little stories I'm going to point out to you that illustrate this. Initially, we've got the story of the centurion. Matthew 8, verse 10. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but Jesus says this. He was astonished and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I've not found anyone in Israel with such, and here's the semi-quantitative bit, great faith. You hear it? It's not binary. It's not like faith or no faith. It's great faith. Equally, 8 verse 26. This is coming off the back of Jesus calming the storm. And they're really terrified, basically, and they wake Jesus up and they say, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And he replies, you have little faith. Again, semi-quantitative characterization of faith. Why are you so afraid? And then he gets up, rebukes the wind and the waves, and it all goes completely calm. So look, faith is not binary. It's not either there or isn't there. It's an experience. It's a journey. There are moments where it feels big and there are moments where it feels small. And it's important to acknowledge that. And even if we have a moment like Barak did where we're not quite sure how it's going to pan out, and maybe we're a little bit conditional about it, and even though there might be a if only it could have been moment, there is still a celebration of how God works through us and brings us to the other side, to the point in Hebrews 11 where Barak is mentioned among the greats of faith. The thing is, it's really hard sometimes when we get direct instruction when it comes to faith, because we do rationalize. We look at the risks, odds, benefits ratio, and we go, are we really sure? Maybe we feel like that rich young ruler and we go, it's going to cost me too much. I don't know how I can afford it. My time, my money, my skills. I don't feel confident. I feel like a Moses where I just need somebody beside me doing it for me. Often, we enter into those moments where we don't fully appreciate how God is going to work it all through. But when we come out the other side, a bit like driving a car, we get a rear view mirror experience and we see that God was with us. We see what God did in spite of those moments of edginess and of perhaps doubt or where the equation doesn't quite square off. There's a wonderful verse, and we read it in Judges 4, but you might have missed it as we went through it. And I'm going to read it to you again. This is the moment where Deborah encourages Barak. You see, as a leader, she knows who she's working with. And that's a really important feature of leadership. Leadership isn't just about doling out the commands and then expecting implicit and immediate obedience. It's about understanding, having that situational awareness, the character awareness, the understanding of who you're trying to coach and lead forwards. And she says to him, go, in verse 14, this is the day that the Lord has given Caesarea into your hands. Has not the Lord gone before you? In other words, have that rear view moment. God has already done it. He's already in the battle. He's already making a way for you through this situation where you can't see how it's going to work out. The 10,000 men versus the 600 Exocet missiles. I don't know, whatever you want to put into that for, the bit where it just doesn't seem possible. God has gone before you. Come back to that Psalm 23 verse 5 that we read earlier. The table in the presence of my enemies. The juxtaposition of peace, safety, and security in a world where there should only be doubt and fear and equations that don't work. You see, this is how our God works. He works with all the ranges of faith in front of him. The little faith, the great faith, the Thomas, put your hand on my side, stop doubting, believe type faith. This is the God who won't break a bruised reed or smouldering wick he won't snuff out. This is the God who draws alongside. And in spite of how confident we may or may not feel, he can take the faith as it is and create a story where we're listed along the greats, not because we are great, but because God has enabled us to do great things in his name. So come back full circle. We're just ordinary people in this church. Whoever stands up the front here or picks up a guitar, we're just ordinary people. We might seem confident. We're not really. And I know that because of my character. The only confidence I have is in what God has been able to do through me. And the experiences I have and the words he gives me build my confidence and faith in him. That's why the words of Deborah mean a lot to me. God has gone before us. And often when I drive home after church and reflect, I think, wow, God, you're so faithful. You gave me something. I didn't know where it was going to come from or what it was going to be or how it was going to work out, but you gave it to me anyway. And I feel that at the moment there's a real season across this church where perhaps for a number of us, we just need that moment where we feel that sense of confidence again. God is with us. That Psalm 23, you're with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Maybe your faith has taken a bit of a low. Maybe you've faced a command, a direct instruction from God to go and do something, but like Jonah, you rushed off in the opposite direction. God really wants each of us to draw back again to that table, to that place where we feel like we're back within the family. It may be that God is putting somebody on your heart that used to be at the table here. Maybe you just need to draw alongside and be really upfront with. God is calling you back. Sometimes we tiptoe around faith. So gentle, so we don't want to offend, but actually God's commanding everyone to repent. Look, God's commanding that about turn. The Bible is there, it's crystal clear, and meets us where we're at. But like I said about Deborah, God is the most gracious and wonderful of leaders where, whilst he is explicit in his commands, he provides all of the support and the encouragement to bring us through. Like I said with Thomas, put your hand there, feel it, sense it, believe it. I want to show you. I want to take you with me. So what does Barak tell us? He tells us that we sometimes have crises of confidence, but God can work through us in spite of that. And we can flourish to the point of having our names alongside the greats. Not that we're seeking that, far from it. We're servants. But God is able to give us everything we need to flourish in his kingdom. Okay.